filibuster. And Senator McConnell found a quote of several years ago where I spoke in favor of the filibuster to protect minority rights in the Senate. It's true. I did say that. And it was based on life experience, having already served in the Senate for a number of years. I came to understand how it evolved as one of the procedures of the Senate. But I'll have to say to you that my impression of the filibuster changed. And the reason it changed was none other than the Republican Senate Majority Leader, now Minority Leader, Senator McConnell. You see, the filibuster really was created in the Senate through its own rules, as I explained yesterday. And it came to define the Senate in this respect. The Founding Fathers looked to the Senate to provide two representatives, and literally senators, from each state, regardless of population. So smaller states, back in the original colonies, smaller states like Delaware would have the same number of senators as a large state like Virginia. And that was their intention. So the protection of minority rights was kind of built into the definition of the United States Senate. And the filibuster became its manifestation in the procedure, the daily procedure of the Senate. And under that filibuster, of course, one senator could stop the debate or at least slow it down by insisting on a filibuster, only to be stopped by an extraordinary majority of the Senate voting to return to the regular business. That was the case in 1957, because in August of 1957, Senator Strom Thurmond took to the floor of this United States Senate and initiated the longest filibuster in its history, 24 hours and 18 minutes. The man stood by his desk and spoke without stopping. He didn't have any permission to leave the floor for any reason, and certainly couldn't sit down without losing his filibuster. He did it. He did it for the wrong reason, I'm afraid, because he was trying to stop the march of civil rights in this country. But he did it, determined he achieved that goal. And when he did, in 1957, that was the 5th filibuster in the history of the Senate in the previous 5 decades. In other words, if you went back to 1919, all the way to 1957, Strom Thurmond's was the 5th filibuster in history. Once every decade, a filibuster emerged on the Senate floor. Well, that world has changed, dramatically changed. We can now have 5 filibusters in a couple weeks. We now have, on average, 80 filibusters a year because of the urging and direction of the senator from Kentucky, Senator McConnell. He has institutionalized the filibuster to the point where it is now the normal course of business, not an extraordinary procedure. I recounted the fact that I introduced the DREAM Act 20 years ago. 20 years ago. Durbin, what kind of a senator are you that in 20 years you can't pass the DREAM Act? Well, I brought it to the Senate floor on 5 different occasions, and on 5 different occasions it was stopped by the filibuster. Other members can tell the story of their legislative experience on the floor too. The point I'm getting to is this. It wasn't until Senator McConnell and the Republicans who follow him decided to make the filibuster just daily business in the Senate that it was abused to the point where the Senate stopped doing regular legislative business. I'd like Senator McConnell to come to the floor the next opportunity he has and explain this to me. In the last calendar year, 2020, the Senate considered 29 amendments on the floor of the Senate in the entire year. Now, that doesn't count votorama, which is an aberration that I don't think would ever be accused of being deliberative. But 29 regular order amendments during the course of a year. Embarrassing, isn't it? When you think of this great so-called debating society, 29 times we brought an amendment to the floor. Well, it was an improvement over the previous year, 30% improvement, in fact, because in the year 2019, under Senator McConnell's leadership, we had 22 amendments. So when Senator McConnell and others come to the floor and plead for us to hang on to the traditions of the Senate, I would tell you that their interpretation of the traditions is strangling this body. They have beaten the old filibuster to the point where it is hardly recognizable and is now regular order of business in the United States Senate. And that's why many of us, frustrated with having worked so hard to come here, wanting to do the best we can to represent the people who've sent us here, are so frustrated by the current state of procedure. And for Senator McConnell and other Republicans to come to the floor and plead for hanging on to this tradition is actually pleading for the Senate to continue to do less and less each year. There are those of us now in control on the majority side, bare majority side, on the Democratic side, who really believe there's much more to be done in the Senate. The American people expect us to respond. Now, you might ask, well, how did you pass the American Rescue Plan if there's a filibuster used so frequently? It was under a process called reconciliation, which depends on a majority vote. You can't filibuster under the reconciliation. That's why this amazing bill, this new law, the American Rescue Plan by President Biden, is so sweeping in its reach. We had to try to combine under this law so many provisions that have been affected by the pandemic and the state of the economy, because we knew that returning to the regular order of business with the filibuster looming every single day would tie our hands just as sure as we've seen in the past several years. So, Senator McConnell, thank you for mentioning my name, but if I became skeptical of the filibuster, it's because of your use of it. And I hope that you understand that you can't have it both ways. It can't be a rare procedure and be a procedure that dominates the actual business of the Senate, as this has done for so many years. Mr. President, I ask that my following remarks be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Last year, I came to the floor on multiple occasions to ask consent for a simple, sensible resolution. It called for the United States to cooperate in global efforts to address the COVID pandemic. At the time, that point was obvious, and it's even more obvious today. Pandemics don't respect borders. None of us are safe from highly infectious diseases until all of us are safe. That's especially important to keep in mind as we begin to turn a corner here in America. Last week, during his first address to the nation, President Biden announced that all adults in America over the age of 18 will be eligible for vaccinations on May 1st of this year. If all goes to plan, we can look forward, as President Biden mentioned, to a 4th of July with family and close friends at a close distance. Considering what they inherited, the Biden administration deserves credit for dramatically scaling up vaccinations in America. The administration helped to strike an historic partnership between rival drug makers, ramped up manufacturers of vaccine, and improved coordination with state officials everywhere. We're seeing the world of difference that this makes. When you put competent, qualified leadership in charge in the White House and in state capitals, good things happen. Our weekly vaccine shipments in Illinois have nearly doubled. The federal government has erected a mass vaccination site at the United Center in Chicago, and it's also supported partnerships with community health centers and retail pharmacies to expand access to vaccines. A cautious hopefulness is washing over America, but we can't lose momentum in our fight against COVID. To put this pandemic really behind us and to bury it in history, we need to lend a hand to the many poor nations that have yet to receive a single dose of vaccine. The inequities are stark. 10 countries have accounted for 75% of total vaccinations administered worldwide, while approximately 100 countries have yet to administer any vaccine dosage. This dangerous shortfall has the potential to undermine the good work that's happening here in America. Closing this gap is not only the right and moral thing to do, it's the safest and smartest things to do to stop the threat COVID and its increasingly contagious variants pose to us all. Remember back a little over a year ago, an obscure city in China generated a virus, we think they did, that ended up circling the world many times over and changing life on this planet. Last month, I received a briefing from Dr. Fauci on the new genetic mutations of COVID-19. He shared troubling news about variants that are emerging in the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Brazil. Some of them may have more resistance to our current vaccines than we care to see. He warned that if we fail to stamp out the virus globally, then we will continue to see risks within our own borders. Variants of the virus could counteract the tremendous progress we've made and the progress that we're poised to make in the near future. As I said at the outset, viruses don't recognize borders. Crushing the virus in other countries is a strategic investment in our own national safety and security. President Biden understands this. He's serious about addressing the virus first in America and then around the world. He has set us on a pace to vaccinate all eligible Americans over the course of next several months. And let me urge those who are hesitant or skeptical as to whether it's the right thing to do it, please, for yourself, for those you love, and for this nation. President Biden wisely halted President Trump's withdrawal from the World Health Organization. He joined the global COVAX vaccine effort, and he allocated significant funding toward global vaccination efforts, funding that is expanded under the American Rescue Plan, which we passed just a few weeks ago here in the Senate. Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen recently announced that the United States will support the issuance of special drawing rights, a type of IMF foreign exchange reserve that can help poor countries buy vaccines and weather the economic fallout from the pandemic, a welcome move that I encouraged and was a co-author of with Senator Sanders and Congressman Chuy Garcia. Just last week, the President announced a partnership with key allies in the Pacific region to provide at least 1 billion COVID vaccines to countries in Asia. This is prescient global leadership, long overdue. The President's actions will save lives here at home and abroad, and these investments will fuel a global economic recovery, which we all want to see. To understand why a global strategy is called for, look at history. Some of you who are witnessing this statement on the floor at home may be old enough to have a distinct circular scar on your upper arm. Maybe you've seen it on the arms of a parent or grandparent. That mark is a relic from one of the world's greatest public health victories, the eradication of the deadly smallpox virus. The fact that so few people living today remember the death and misery caused by that disease is a testament to global public health strategy that stopped it. Smallpox was one of the most devastating diseases to afflict mankind. It is estimated to have killed up to 300 million people in the 20th century, 500 million people in the last 100 years. In 1967, the World Health Organization launched an historic international effort to eradicate it. It was one of the most successful public health initiatives in human history. Next month marks the 41st anniversary of that historic achievement. In the years since, America has led similar global efforts to stamp out diseases like polio and Ebola. If we follow in these footsteps, historians will one day add COVID to the top of that list of historic achievements. Pursuing a global strategy is the most effective way, maybe the only way, to accelerate vaccine production and distribution in every corner of the world. By sharing our wealth of knowledge and resources with the world, we reap life-saving benefits, not just around the world, but right here at home. We all know public health is bigger than partisanship and always has been. In the 2000s, for example, I called on then President Bush to help stem the scourge of AIDS around the world through the historic PEPFAR program. At the time, many of my Republican friends in the Senate supported it. I hope and expect that they'll do the same when it comes to addressing the global effort against COVID-19. The moment calls for nothing less. Public health experts understand that President Biden understands. I know we here in Congress understand that we can end the threat of COVID once and for all. It's within our power. I ask consent, Mr. President, that the next statement I make be put in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, let me start this statement by saying I'm a fan of the U.S. Postal Service. I have been throughout my life. I believe the men and women who make the Postal Service work do a great service to this country and distinguish us from many countries in the world which don't have anything near our service or reliability in delivering the mail. Having said that, and believe it to my inner being, the Postal Service needs to take a hard look at what's going on within their ranks today. Last month, the U.S. Postal Service Great Lakes area sent out a postal equivalent of an SOS. It put out a call to mail carriers in 5 surrounding states asking for letter carriers to come to my state of Illinois and help deliver a huge backlog of undelivered packages and envelopes. It pleaded for mail carriers in the 5 collar counties surrounding Chicago to help deliver Chicago's mail on Sundays. Ken LeBay is one of the mail carriers who answered that call for help. Mr. LeBay has been a mail carrier in suburban Mount Prospect, Illinois, just outside Chicago for 28 years. He's a president of the local letter carriers union. He's also quite an athlete. In 2002, he was the only mail carrier on the USPS-sponsored professional cycling team. He volunteered for the last Sunday in February. He figured he had the knowledge and endurance to help reduce the mail backlogs that had plagued the Postal Service in Chicago. What he discovered, he said, stunned him. At every home he delivered to, he stuffed 20 to 30 pieces of mail in the mailbox. He worked 12 hours on that Sunday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., sun up to sundown, without a break even for lunch. Still, he couldn't complete the assigned workload. The sheer volume of backlog mail was too great. Inside the local post office, Ken said, he found packages stacked everywhere. Some appeared to have been there for a month or more. The entire situation looked, in his words, like an episode of extreme hoarders, a crisis. Chicagoland is not the only postal chaos location, Mr. President. Nearly 9 months after a new Postmaster General unveiled his surprise reorganization plan, Postal Service in much of the nation is erratic. Mail delays are the longest they've been in generations. According to the Postal Service's own numbers, the agency's delivery times have shrunk to historic lows since the new Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, took over last June. At the end of December, the agency had an on-time rate of 38% for non-local mail. What was it 1 year earlier? 92%. 92% on-time rate descended to 38% under Postmaster General DeJoy. Before Louis DeJoy took over, 91% of Postal Service customers gave USPS high marks, one of the highest approval ratings of any government agency. Today, postal customers across America, certainly in my state of Illinois, wait anxiously for important checks and bills that arrive weeks late, if at all. They check tracking websites to search for delayed packages, only to read that the package is, quote, out for delivery. In some neighborhoods in Chicago, residents have given up hope of receiving mail at home. They stand in line for hours at the local post office to try to retrieve their mail themselves. Often, even that doesn't work. Tracy Otis is one of those people. One day last month, she was one of 40 customers, 40, waiting in line at the Postal Service station in the Gresham neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. Miss Otis hadn't had regular mail delivery since Christmas. She waited in line for hours, hoping to retrieve a package of diabetic test strips before her current supply ran out. She told a Chicago Sun-Times reporter that she would volunteer to sort the mail if it would help. She went home empty-handed that day, still not sure where her package was or when, if ever, she might see it. Last month, my staff in Chicago estimated that there might be 300 pieces of mail sitting undelivered in 4 Chicago postal facilities. We based that estimate on the number of complaints we'd received in our office. Soon after that, the Postal Inspector General released a report that showed we were wrong. There weren't 300 letters in postal limbo in these facilities. There were 19,000 undelivered pieces of mail in those 4 facilities. Since then, in my state, the chaos has stretched way beyond Chicago. We hear from all over the state: Springfield, Champaign-Urbana, Belleville, East St. Louis, Quincy, Peoria, the Quad Cities, and Rockford. These days in Illinois and across America, we're seeing real hardship for tens of millions of Americans waiting for mail delivery. Patients and pharmacists complain about late medication. People are getting dinged for late mortgage and utility payments and forced to pay late fees. Insurance policies are being canceled because of late payments. Small business owners are forced to wait weeks or months for payments. Others are flooded with calls and emails from customers wondering where their packages are, a good way to lose business. Who is Louis DeJoy, the mastermind of this mess? Did he come through the ranks of the Postal Service like 4 postmaster generals before him? No. His qualifications? He's a former logistics executive who donated millions of dollars to Donald Trump and the Republicans. No experience working at the Postal Service before Donald Trump tapped him to head this agency last June. 1 month later, in the middle of a pandemic that turned postal deliveries into a lifeline for many, Mr. DeJoy unveiled a radical plan to reorganize the Postal Service after only 1 month in the job and no experience in the department. He slashed overtime hours, prohibited late and extra mail delivery trips, and set stricter delivery schedules. In August, with no public explanation, the Postal Service began removing mail sorting machines from postal facilities around the country, reducing their ability to process mail. Amazingly, the Postal Service Inspector General determined that the changes were ordered with no analysis and no understanding of how they might affect the timeliness of mail delivery. A federal lawsuit forced the agency to put the changes on hold until after the election. On February 6, Mr. DeJoy was quoted in the Washington Post saying that his new plan for reorganizing the Postal Service would be ready for public release, quote, as early as next week. He said that on February 6. We're still waiting for it. Waiting for the DeJoy plan to shape up the Postal Service. It's like waiting for a lost package. We know some of the biggest changes Mr. DeJoy intends to propose because he's confirmed them publicly. The DeJoy plan for shaping up the post office is expected to call for the following: service cuts, higher prices, and slower mail delivery. If that sounds like a winning combination to you, I have some vintage computers to sell to your business. In short, this is not a solution. This is a sabotage of essential public service, and we shouldn't tolerate it. Well, America has a new president who understands that affordable, efficient postal service is essential to America. 5 days after taking office, President Biden replaced the chair of the Postal Regulatory Commission. Late last month, he filled 3 vacancies on the Postal Service Board of Governors, the body that hires the Postmaster General and oversees the Postal Service. I encourage President Biden to make all the changes necessary to rescue the Postal Service. Mr. DeJoy has offered a stream of excuses for the chaos that has fallen the Postal Service since he showed up. He says it's the pandemic, the Christmas holidays, bad weather, racial justice protests, an election. He's got a list as long as your arm. I would remind him that in 1864, we held a national election in the middle of a civil war, and 150,000 Union Army troops voted absentee from the field. The Postal Service is as old as America itself. It has proven that it can adapt to crises with the right leadership. If Mr. DeJoy cannot or will not provide that leadership, I respectfully suggest he step down. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.